And we're live. How you doing, man?
Good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. I had a job interview today that I nailed, and so
Oh,
I am
nice.
riding high.
Cool, brother.
So what
Yeah,
can you help?
interviews are always stressful because you never know exactly how things are going to go, and it depends on. I mean, I don't know what. I don't know if you want to share what job it is, but
Bell's Outlet,
sometimes.
a little retail store down in Bartow.
Oh, okay. So it's stress free, anyways, because like
Yeah,
consequences of doing a bad interview. I always found that with myself was like, when I was really like when you need a job, it's always way more stressful than when you're just kind of like, I could I could deal with a better job. I don't really
yeah,
need this job. It's more like
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
So
like there's a bunch of places high when in Bartow. I just need something part time while I'm doing my schoolwork, and so I figured, oh,
mm,
here, like they're never busy, they're laid back. All I gotta do is clean the floors up at night. Easy peasy. I can keep my headphones in most of
whatever.
the day. So it's no more
Fantastic.
stress with the interview. So it's just this is the stress of actually trying to get a job because everyone here is hiring. Everybody here is requiring a vaccine pass, a vaccine mandate. And
Mm,
so I keep applying places like, are you vaccinated? I'm like, no, and they wouldn't hire me. And so it's just I finally found a place that won't require the vaccine. And so I'm hoping I'll get the job. Otherwise I might have to get the vaccine.
yeah, I
That would
know.
suck.
It's a difficult time trying to negotiate both your higher instincts and principles versus needing to eat. So,
Yeah.
which is they've done a very good job with this. I will. You know what, man? I've always said that you always need to you always got to compliment your adversary because or the adversary because sometimes if they do something you're like, well played, sir. Well,
Yeah.
very well played.
That was me reading. I did a book club with Aaron and Nate from Reality Oz of what was it called? White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. What's
I saw that you did that. I haven't gotten to it yet.
oh
I just
it's
listened.
fun.
Yeah, I just listened to part of your at least about halfway through your patchwork with Jay.
Yep.
And then I
Audio on that
listened
one was
to
terrible until halfway through.
yeah. Then I listened to Poppy Andrew do his rebuttal. I haven't listened to his full rebuttal with against Ace and stuff, but you brought up a really good point actually when in your talk with Popular Liberty that atheists or ex-atheists tend to veer towards orthodoxy, and that's completely true with myself.
Mhm.
I have a bit of a cultural relationship with Russian Orthodoxy as well, so that's but
Mhm.
neither here nor there really. Um, and yeah, I found that interesting. That it's a good observation, and I think it's true is that I can't remember if you brought this up or Andrew did. I think it was you saying that mysticism is really what's lacking in atheism. So when you get to that point of when reason begins to fail you, and in my case, I had what I would describe as a spiritual awakening, like
Mhm.
a full on, God came to me and spoke through me, which is unsettling to say the least.
Mhm.
And it's you get filled with shame and a whole bunch of other really complex emotions to deal with.
Mhm.
Um, but once you're faced with that, there's nothing reasonable about that experience.
Yeah.
It kind of flies in the face of what the new atheists always were claiming, that man invented God. It's like, okay, look, I understand the argument. I've used the argument quite a bit myself, but
Mhm.
over the years. But here's a weird thing: is like, why in the world would we invent a God like the God we have? Like, you wouldn't. If you looked out of the list of what God is, both in the Old and New Testament, even the New Testament, which is probably a bit more kindly
Mhm.
and more gentler version thereof, but in some instances, it's still like you're still faced by judgment and damnation. Like, why the hell would humans invent that? Like, it doesn't make any sense, really.
Yeah.
And
Like that's
and
actually
then when you
the
start, yeah,
first thing
sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
thinking about is like in Greek mythology, the claim is like atheists created God, so they atheists claim Christians, people who created religions. You had to fear of the unknown. It's like you look at the old pagan religions, everyone went to hell unless you like died a hero's death. Like the
Yeah,
constant state was just you were damned. And so Christianity came along with like these Abrahamic religions, like no, it's actually heaven is possible for everybody, not just the heroic. And it's like that's actually a
yeah.
saving grace of it. It's I don't know. The new atheist critique of religion makes sense until you actually really get to know religion, and you're like, these don't hold up to scrutiny.
Well, I think that's it. I think oftentimes, and so to get to link this to our conversation about suicide of the West, because I was just thinking this today for the secularists out there. You can imagine our conversation about liberalism, specifically progressives and conservatives, being part of the same frame. They're inside the liberal frame. Sargon of Akkad calling himself a classic liberal is like, okay, but you're still a liberal. Like, at best, all you can do is put the brakes on this project and maybe hold back the inevitable. But the inevitable is part of the program. Like, you can't fight liberalism within liberalism. It's impossible. Yeah. It's the same thing with about Christianity. Roman Catholics versus, let's say, the Orthodoxy. It's not really a versus, but the distinction to anyone outside of it would seem ridiculous, like silly, like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, Pope, no Pope, whatever, right?
It's like the Orthodox had when the Protestant Reformation happened. The Orthodox take on it was like, so heretics split from heretics. Like, that's how people outside religion view these distinctions.
Right, and I think that actually, and that's a really good point, right? Because for the Orthodox, like, they just looked at it and said, well, I mean, yeah, what you want? We told you this was going to happen. Like, this is explicit. Like, like, we said it from the very beginning, man. If you break from these traditions, weird shit's going to start happening. So you own it now, Yeah. And it's the same thing with liberalism. It's like, when you hear conservative voices trying to present themselves as this alternative, it's like, okay, you're an alternative, but to what, really? Like, at best, you can maybe reverse policy back to like 1955, but for how long is that going to happen? You can't. You have to get outside the liberal frame completely in order to deal with it. Yeah, Putin, weirdly enough, who it's been very awkward, man, in the last few months, where it's like all of a sudden I'm like, I don't like the man. He's evil, but I mean, and he's about to invade the country of my forefathers, but at the same time, he's got some valid points. When he was talking recently, he had a speech where he was basically warning the United States. He's like, look, man, we've been where you're going. It's not a good place. Like, don't go down this road. Especially with critical race theory and all the rest of it. And that's the whole thing. If you're outside of it, you can see it for what it is. And I'm not trying to say that we should all, become Russian or make Putin
we
the
should
ruler.
ride horses shirtless and make Putin king. I was going to say that's what we should do, actually.
Yeah,
I would.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, Putin, for all his faults, I can't not respect him, because it's like he's alpha, and he's what you would want in a king. This not a good guy in a sort of way. It's like he commands respect wherever he goes, and you compare it to our presidents who are laughing stock. At least when Putin kills a journalist, I'm like, okay, you shouldn't kill people, but also you're taking the right people. You're taking out journalists. You're taking out people who oppose you. Like, if you were just not so bad, not so extreme, if you tempered it a little bit with, say, Christianity, he'd be great.
Well, no, he is tempered with Christianity. He's an Orthodox. He's there's my daughter. I mean, this is where, if America and Russia do get into some sort of Cold War or something, whatever scenario it ends up being, the writing's on the wall where they're going to start attacking Orthodoxy, specifically Russian Orthodoxy, and because they're going to have to paint Putin out as a fascist at some point.
Yeah.
Like, that's inevitable.
Yeah.
They can't do that with Xi Jinping, which, okay, and we'll get to this in chapter 11, really, but I'm laying the groundwork, folks. But yeah, they're going to have to start painting him out to be a fascist, so they can start running the liberal ideology, and then everything else becomes acceptable. This is the same thing they do with Trump. As soon as they could call him a fascist, it's like, okay, now what do we do to fascists? Yeah. Everything we want to, anything we want to at all. So
yeah, I absolutely hate that word fascist, because it's like, oh, we're Italy again. We're 1940s Italy. Because that fascism is such a like the common difference in fascism is right-wing authoritarianism, and it's like, no, fascism more or less was like an Italian saying of these people in this time. It was a group of people. I feel like the definition people use now for fascism is so it's a catch-all, Anything they don't like is fascism, and there's no real definition they can provide besides right-wing authoritarianism. And it's like, they're all right-wing authoritarians who would like fascism, but I don't think that encompasses all. Which is the problem I think the left has with the right, is that the right is a group of a bunch of different sub-ideologies, but there is no real coherent ideology because whatever is not left is right wing, and so they can't really describe what we are because they don't see us as anything. They see us all as one thing, and it's like no, libertarians and neocons are both on the right, but we're not at all. They're not all similar, and that's the problem with these anything that's not left is right frameworks.
Yeah. Well, I think even the framework really is the words themselves are meaningless now, because again, left right within a liberal frame is still within a liberal frame. So ultimately, both sides are going to start going for the same answers. We saw this in Burnham with the Suicide of the West in I think chapter 3 or whatever where he does the 39 points.
Yeah,
and he's saying that all liberals would agree with all these. Reactionaries would disagree with all these, and conservatives would be more or less in the middle with a lot of this stuff. And if you look at those points from 2020 perspective, you see that a lot of these things have flipped, where liberals are no longer on the side of free of unequivocal free speech. A few of those things are absolutely still true, like the race relations and love of the downtrodden and so on and so forth. But it's mostly because they need those things. They need those people, and they need to make them they need to make the right the enemy of the people, and because leftism doesn't exist without the right. Like that's how they define themselves. That's not really exactly true with, let's say, classic right wing anything. Is that the right wing doesn't care if there's left? I shouldn't say it doesn't care, but the right wing, traditionalism or hierarchy exists without liberalism. It existed for thousands of years before liberalism. It'll exist thousands of years after liberalism. Liberalism isn't required for, let's say, whatever we could define as classic right wing thought. Personally speaking, like I'm neither here nor there. I wouldn't consider myself right wing. And certainly wouldn't consider myself left wing, because my desire or my goal, I guess, is to free myself mentally and emotionally from those distinctions and to start to see things as is, not as presented, but as is. And that's the. I think the only way, and I think the only pathway, certainly just finish. I think the only pathway into that is through Christianity. So
no, I don't really describe myself as anything political anymore. I just think the terms don't mean anything. The terms really are only defined by the opposition. Like you can define conservatives, but how you define it is not going to matter how a liberal defines it, or how someone on the right or left defines it. And so, but the problem is, I have a lot of friends who are into politics, and so they ask me, "What are you?" I feel like if I don't have an answer, I'm just looking at it as weird. And so I just say I'm Catholic, and I let them draw their own conclusions from there. And I can just kind of work wherever I want to inside the Catholic framework, which works for me. Because I can just say I'm Catholic. I think, so I can guess you're pro-life. I can guess these few things, and what else is there? Like, well, let me talk to you. I'm a Catholic monarchist, and then from there it's gone. But
yeah. No, it's always good to throw out a word where people go, huh? And you see their mind blink for a second. You're like, good, okay, great, conversation over, bye. I avoid it at all costs now, because I'll throw that out too. Like, oh, I'm a monarchist, and they're like, huh? Like, yeah, okay, let's just stop talking about this right now. Then it's going to be easier for both of us.
I do a troll like, I want Trump to come back, but as a king. And I just watch them, the hands kind of go, wait, what? I'm like, I don't want that, but I don't want you to think I want that, because then you won't talk to me.
Yeah, it's easier. But all right, let's jump into it, man.
So,
where do you want to start?
So how we're going to do this episode, I think, is we're just going to take it, like you suggested, we can take a chapter, and we're going to kind of talk about said chapter and what we got out of it, and then that'll be episode 2, and then we'll probably do one more episode where we kind of finish the book out and bring it all home and kind of go, what are our big takeaways from this book? So,
okay, perfect.
I'm going to go with chapter 6, because it's the entire chapter basically on this ideologies, and not really ideology, like what an ideology does to people, the ideological syndrome, I guess you could call it, and how it's like, once you the example he gave of the different people's ideologies arguing, first it was a lot of fun to read because he takes the opposite view of them every time, and it just makes it interesting. But the example of like the racist, and he goes through point by point of why no, these people are equal, and he always moves it back because it's always a thing before what the universal truth. He found the ideological person has found a universal truth. And it's plainly obvious, and he just has to rationalize everything that comes before him to coincide with that presuppositional that he has decided. So facts, reason, none of that matters. It just has to be what it lines up with the ideology. You're always searching for that thing. Once I noticed that when I was reading White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, is that when we speak about racism, white people would be like, "Oh, you bring up race at the dinner table when somebody had a joke," and they'd be like, "Hey, can you not ruin the party with all your woke nonsense?" And she'd be like, "I broke from white solidarity, and that was why I was attacked." And it's like, obviously, the attack came from racism because you don't see how racist our society is, and everything was very through the lens of I have a universal truth, the sky is blue, racism is systemic. Let's go from there, and you can't deal with these people in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read a quote that I've highlighted from chapter 6. This is where Burnham's talking about ideology or ideologue. An ideologue, or one who thinks ideologically. It'd be nice if I speak English, right? Or one who thinks ideologically can't lose. He can't lose because his answer, his interpretation, and his attitude have been determined in advance of the particular experience or observation. They are derived from the ideology and are not subject to the facts. There is no possible argument, observation, or experiment that could disprove a firm ideological belief, for the very simple reason that an ideologue will not accept any argument, observation, or experiment as constituting disproof. Thus, this we say candidly proclaimed in Mr. Hitchens' speech. One advantage of this faith in liberalism is that it is practically, there is no reason for even that modest qualification, shockproof. And then he goes on. Yeah, he does that great back and forth where it's like everything, no matter what facts you present, the answer is always no. I'm right, you're wrong. And it's interesting because it's immune to reason, and especially in classic liberalism, which is supposed to be basically the almost the religion of reason. Where reason is placed at the most highest principle, and reason can solve all things. It just keeps proving that man is not a reasonable animal. We don't derive the majority of our decisions, our moral decisions, or anything from a reasonable or logical position. It comes from an instinct or intuition first. We feel it first, and then we begin to extrapolate and come up with ideas and reasons for that feeling. I've said this for forever now, both on and off the air, is that, and especially because my studies in communism, it's amazing to me is how it was never the system, it's always the people. So the system's always perfect. It's never to blame. You can't blame communism. You can't blame any of the policies. But those damn people keep screwing it up. And if only, right? And this is the dangerous thing. If you catch yourself saying "if only," the next thing out of your mouth is probably going to be garbage. Because if only means, if everyone just thought the way I thought and acted the way I acted, we would be in utopia. Everything would be Shangri-La and beautiful. And that is absolute horseshit because it doesn't hold up to reality.
Yeah, no. Like only way you get utopia is this one guy. Like that's my view on utopia is existing. Like, no, you kill everybody, one guy, kills himself, and then nothing. That's it. Because you gotta always. It's a great quote, and it's from a video game, Team Fortress 2, which is it's a joke, but it's also a great quote. The company that sells video games, and they say, as long as there's two people left alive, one's gonna want the other one dead. We're gonna be there to sell them the gun. And that's how people work.
Well, I mean, this is the only thing that I think Foucault ever said that I fairly much fully agree with, is that in power dynamics, he was talking about how if you put two people in a room, you're going to get into a power dynamic. So someone is going to start to assert dominance over another one, and that can be a back and forth. You see this in marriages and long-term relationships, or even friendships. It's very, very rare to get people completely sharing power and opinion. You're going to see a hierarchy within certain situations develop. So, where one person might have more expertise in one area, another person has an expertise in another area, and then so on and so forth. And if someone has more expertise in general, they're going to be the more dominant personality versus the person who's going to have to be submissive or sublimate themselves because, what do they know, right? And this seems to be always the problem with liberal the liberal syndrome in trying to collapse those hierarchies. It's unnatural. and it always leads to unnatural results.
Absolutely. Now, like this, let's get to it. I want to point out one of the things he brought up was those two black guys who ran the who picked up the cardboard boxes and collapsed them in the back of a truck. Truck was barely working. They barely made any money. He said it's probably the only job they could manage because they weren't the smartest people. But the ideological abstraction hadn't been satisfied by increasing minimum wage, and that is how. Once I heard that word ideological abstraction had to be satisfied, I'm like, you kind of know that intuitively that liberals have these ideology has to be satisfied no matter what the outcome is. But when you said the word ideological abstraction, like that's how you describe it.
Mm-hmm.
This minimum wage, equal school equality, this egalitarian menace. There's some abstraction that they cannot sleep, they cannot be comfortable because they cannot accept reality. They have to meddle and make it clean. And then once that happens, it's great. It doesn't matter what the actual effects are. On paper, we did it. Actually, look at it.
Yes, I mean, this is all about fractal error as well, right? So when you start off with and I used to be more of a Millsian, right? So when I speak ill of this stuff, it's like I'm speaking to myself 10 years ago, where I really and I did the same thing. Like, if only egalitarianism would work, if only. So I'm completely to blame for all this stuff too. But it's when you begin with that fractal error, the presupposition that man is inherently good, and that all we need to do is give them opportunities to express his goodness, and it will automatically manifest. That all men created equal inherently. That is the error. It's an error that is so profound that I think that's why they can't deal with it. When you are trapped in that liberal frame, you can't see the forest from the trees, literally, because it's to deal with that one central fault that everything springs from. Whereas you take from the Christian mindset, that's like, no, man is fallen. We're fallen creatures, but we were saved, and to live up to that salvation, we must constantly be trying to better ourselves and try to live up to the example as best we can every single day. Where liberalism kind of inverts that whole thing, saying there's an ideal here, and every man can attain that ideal if only XYZ, if only they get paid more, if only they have more education, if only da 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 da. And as we know, it's like, look, you can work your ass off, and you're never going to be Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. Like the chances of someone from Skid Row becoming a trillionaire is precisely zero. Like it's not even like a folk tale that's once happened once in a while. It's like no, it's zero. It's not going to happen.
And the only way that will happen is they win the lottery, but then it's gone within a week. It's like they don't ever they can maybe get a lump sum of money, but it ain't gonna last them because the way they operate, it just does not work.
Oh, they would they'd be excluded from the party. Like Donald Trump, for example, was a very was one of those rich people that the left loved when he was on the left, but also he had to comport himself in a very different way. As soon as he started talking in jargon and becoming like more of an everyman and could talk to construction workers, the left didn't want anything to do with him. As a gatekeeping mechanism. That's not even just the left, I should say. It's more like the elites didn't want anything to do with him because it's like, well, we can't do that. It's why you see Bill Gates wearing a sweater vest and dressing down, right, to look like every man. It's laughable. It's basically Superman dressing up as Clark Kent. It's like that's what they think we the common people respond to. It's, I don't give a shit what you wear, dude. Go wear a suit. I don't care. Like whatever. I'm in a weird way. I much more respect Trump being gaudy and audacious, because it's like, well, yeah. I mean, you have more money. You have more money than you're ever going to spend. Like, why not just be silly?
Exactly. Yeah, like that's always been one of my critiques of the American Puritan view of like clothing. Is like, how much do you spend on that watch? It's like, well, yeah, but this watch looks nice, and I want to look nice. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying to look nice. I think it's weird that we have to view everything into like the efficiency of it. I'm like, no, I want something that looks nice for the sake of looking nice. I don't need to have everything be efficient, which is
sure.
And
I mean, African American men really understand that in terms of They understand the power of prestige, right? They understand the power of imagery, and fashion is one of the number one ways. It's like there's no, it's not a coincidence that most of these, a lot of rappers, especially people who come from like lower means, they would all of a sudden get catapulted into having money, at P Diddy, all the rest of it. They automatically go right into fashion. Like they know exactly what their demographic is looking for, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a reason why Kanye West has made more money off his shoes than anything else, right? So, um, but I mean, that's, and again, this is to say that liberals, especially left-leaning liberals, just don't understand this stuff. They claim to support the poor, but don't understand the poor, and actually need the poor to be poor to continue siphoning off money and power off them. I was just thinking this. It's like Judas Iscariot is the classic textbook liberal, where he's a thief who skims off the collections, but who purports to be a big savior of the poor. And
Mm.
and as we know, like as we figured out that that's, well, nope,
Yeah.
that's a lie. But uh, this is exactly what we expect to see, and not to beleaguer the point, but anyone who thinks they can fix this within liberalism, if they think they can reform this, it's not a reformation moment. It's we got to collapse it and build something new from the ashes, or something
Yeah.
old maybe from the ashes. But we can't continue to operate within this framework if you want to achieve something outside of that framework. You got to get outside of it.
Yeah.
You can't fight liberalism with more liberalism. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And well, the point on Skid Row, Skid Row will always exist, and maybe it's actually, I don't know if you watch sort of South Park, but there's this hilarious, they do this gag. It's on, I don't know what season it was, but they have this shitty part of town and they want to reclaim and redensify, and so they buy up the land, they turn it all into like these high end condos and super nice restaurants, and they call it Seat Seat Pond Satipa Town, city part of town. They even relabeled city town as Satipa Town. And all the homeless people then of course just move into the school zone. And it's just like they have to go somewhere. You didn't solve the problems, made it look nice, and they just it's hilarious, but also it's like, no, this is exactly what actually happened, which is why that's so good. It actually speaks truth to what is going on. Um, but it made me think of that episode because it's like, oh yeah, they have to always exist. And one of my big critiques of conservatism when I was like, becoming libertarian was they actually don't want to make things better. They just want to make things look clean. It's like drug laws. I don't want people doing drugs. I want to throw them in prison and screw up their life. It's like, well, actually not helping anybody or making anything clean. You're just making it look nice. You cut off the mo but left the tumor. And that is what a lot of liberalism does when it gentrifies and makes anything nicer. It cuts off the tumor. It still has the mo, still has the tumor. It's still disgusting. It just has a bit of sign to it now.
Actually, I think liberalism is a bit more sicker,
Hmm.
in the sense that, let's say a conservative would want to clean up the area, right? And you can make an argument that the broken windows
Yeah.
ideas, where if you start to have graffiti and all the rest of it, then the whole neighborhood goes to shit really fast. So there can be something to be said about keeping a place looking clean and nice, and that generates higher,
Yeah.
could possibly generate higher moral value with it. But with liberalism, and you can see this playing out in San Francisco and California, Nancy Pelosi famously once said in an interview where she got flustered, and she ended the interview saying, "Well, we feed them. We feed them. We feed these poor people. We know we're important." I think it's the same thing. Is that they're making California Skid Row, so they can come in and save it. Because they need they need to feel like they're saving people in order to justify all the other shitty things they're doing, like Judas, right? I'm sure Judas, in his mind, was doing a great thing by, well, I'm also helping the poor, but I'm also skimming money off the top, right? But the money I skim off the top, yeah, sure, that's not a good thing, but I'm also doing good things. I'm doing great acts, so it kind of it balances out in the end. And of course, we all, anyone who who's even slightly reasonable realizes that that's not how that works.
Mhm.
But it's also explains the whole American left right now, where they need to be the saving force, the salvation force in the world. And as long as and we'll get to this in chapter 11, and so that's really interesting is when you look at, they'll attack Russia for Putin's treatment of, let's say, the LGBTQ blah 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 community, but turn a blind eye to Mao, sorry, to Mao, to to China, locking up Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, and they're like, well, what are you going to do? Well, I mean, you say concentration camps,
it's a weird education center.
Yeah, it's hey, do you know? Those Muslims could be could be right wingers. Those are fascist Muslims. So.
Yeah. No, one of the last things I have on chapter 6 was this line about defeating the poor. Sorry, not feeding the poor. We're going to feed everybody. We have enough food to feed every man on earth, which is completely improbable, impossible. It's not going to happen. But it doesn't matter. The ideological abstraction matters more than reality itself. And the quote was, "When the fact is tragic, ideology offers refuge from fact," which is cope. It's your ideology provides cope, cope and cease. You're not actually gonna affect this with saying you just gotta cope with it, and it's absolutely true with the ideological people. And like I said, some of my favorite people on Twitter are completely ideological, and now I can't not see them reasoning from this being an ideologue. Like I think that you said it, but you said it, not me.
Call him out. I don't care.
I love Ace. He's been on podcast multiple times. I think he is the best of that ideology. I think that is the best I can say about it. Like, when you are, I can respect someone that is going to take the ideology and be an ideologue in the best possible way and not be angry about it. What I can what's his name? I can't. Alex O'Connor. He's a atheist liberal. And he's super logical, reasonable, and nice and polite. And I can respect him. I disagree with everything he says. Vegan, atheism, secularism, everything he says I disagree with. But I can respect and converse with him because I know where he's coming from. I know he just wants to enact his ideology because he truly thinks it's better for everybody. And that's why I think I see with Ace. I mean, I agree with him, but I can respect the effort he is putting in based on what his ideological principles are. I don't think it's the case, but
Yeah, I think the danger is this. And look, I don't want to start a beef. I'd have nothing against Ace. I remember him and I had a back and forth when I made a comment about you don't really have rights, you have rewards. And everything you think is your right in America or in the West isn't a right, isn't like God given. There's no God doesn't give you rights. He gives you responsibilities. He gives you he gives you other things, but they're not rights. You don't have the right to free speech under God. But so these things aren't, and they also don't exist in nature. It's not like we have to invent them. And so what we currently enjoy is really a reward program. If you're within the status quo and you're a good citizen, you get rewarded by being able to do what you want to do to whatever degree. And if you're not, if you're in the out group, you don't get those rewards. And in the last 2 years have proven that completely. If you're unvaccinated in most parts of the West, you can't access, anything. They're getting to the point where they're going to start denying people food. So if you think your human rights is going to somehow magically save you, I have I'm sorry, Buttercup. It doesn't play out. So this goes directly to what we were saying about ideology being immune from fact. Because then Ace was like, no, and kick rocks and I don't know, whatever. Yeah. It was a while ago. But again, it's like, well, look, if your ideology, if what you believe to be true is proven untrue time and time again, and I can just look out your window. I don't have to pull up any magical stats or anything to prove you wrong. I can just go read the daily news, and you're wrong. So you're wrong on from every single perspective. Well, then what good is your ideology? Like,
I think to make it the best defense I can, because I see you're both coming from. To kind of merge the two, I would say you have to have a rights. You have to have an ideology of rights as a starting point to offer the rewards in return. So, for example, I say, okay, well, the rights of a free person are A, B, C, and D. Now, you receive those rights by one being human, but the only way they are actually respected as rights is if you live in a society that also respects those rights. And so you have to have the reward of the society geared towards the truth, which is the rights base. So kind of like to merge both your ideas, I think you're both kind of coming from I think if you guys had a conversation, you would disagree by starting points, but in the end, I think you would end up agreeing. This is how it actually works. I think
Oh,
that
look,
I think that's what I think.
no. I mean, here's the thing: I can see Ace's perspective completely on this. When I made the statement, I knew it was going to be a little bit spicy, but I didn't expect to see like the libertarian rees on this one was intense.
I never know what they're going to weigh about. I never know. It's impossible to guess.
Oh, just the intensity of it. Give me a second, sorry.
No problem. Man's got a family. You gotta, take a break sometimes. People listening.
No, my daughter is into climbing mode, so
Ah,
I'm just watching her like slowly climb into areas where she shouldn't be.
wow.
So yeah, it's from Ace's perspective, and look, and I get it, right? It's an unpopular thing to think. Matt has talked about this as well. I think I always like when Matt and I kind of parallel think, because I come at it from a slightly different perspective because I was never a libertarian. But anyways, so the whole Ace thing is like I understood it completely what he's saying. Because I used to believe in rights myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That rights were fundamental, and that no matter if you were right wing or left wing or on the in or the out, you had the right to have free speech, free association, whatever, what have you. And it's just patently not true. Like it's not something that I like. It's I'm not like championing it. Like screw rights. I'm like no. I would love to have rights. I would love to have rights that are that no one can screw with, or if they screw with it, then there's a whole bunch of other things we can do about it. But that's just not true, and it's never been true. It's that we believed in a lie. We were lied to. We believed the lie, and and as long as it served us, we could turn a blind eye and pretend that the other infractions didn't exist, and these things are fine. And well, you got to break some eggs and make an omelet. And, oh well, there was reasons for this and that, and you made all these excuses. And then finally, when it comes down and when it gets dropped in your lap, you're like, oh shit, fuck. Well, guess we were wrong about that one, and then you move on. And then you accept it and you move on and you try to create a new, more operative worldview. That's my challenge. And it's not about, we can sit here and piss about definitions all we want, but the facts are the facts. That if what you think you have the right to do, you don't unless the government tells you you can do it. And it's always been that way. It's just that that maybe we haven't been so firmly in the out group that we had to worry about it. And now that we are, it's like, oh well. Now you were just saying, like, if you don't get vaccinated, you can't have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your rights now? Where do the rights go? Oh, you're going to complete it to the court? Okay, go to the Supreme Court and see what Justice Sotomayor is going to talk to you about. Like,
No, I yeah, the whole rights thing. Like I used to cringe at the Burkean concept of like you don't have rights, you have responsibility. But now looking at it in like a practical sense, it's like no, I have in my idea. These are the things that are necessary for me to. There's like three ways to look at it. One is what is necessary for a functioning society of people, or respecting each other's ability to do said things. How are those things exceed? Well, they exceed by either A, enforcement mechanisms, or B, shared responsibility, the reward systems for responsibilities you fulfill, or having a system that respects them. And so all those things are great and necessary, but they don't happen. They don't exist they don't exist pre-abstraction. They exist after reality, after the starting point of the government system you live under. And so like saying your rights exist pre-government or pre-man, it's like no, they are abstractions we have created. We are going to function best under, and it works best if everybody believes those things, but it's not the truth. Well, I think that's how I look at it now. Of course, that took me like a year of thinking about to get to, and I'm still working out those abstractions because it's honestly rights are fun to talk about, but they don't matter anymore. It doesn't fucking matter.
It's also peacetime conversation, right? Like we can have those conversations when we're not actively in cultural war, like which may not be the rest of our lifetime for this the way things are going. But yeah, no, it's a silly conversation. Okay, so now let's get back to the book. Chapter 11.
That's chapter. That's it. So I have chapter 6. Let's go into chapter 11.
Chapter 11, which is entitled "Pas d'ennemi au gauche," which in French means "no enemy to the left." And in this chapter, he begins to define the idea that the left wing or the left wing liberals um, would rather would always rather fight the right than accept any misgivings from the left, no matter even if it's from far to the left. Um, so I'll just read a little bit from the start of
Go
the
ahead.
chapter. The moral asymmetry sprung from the guilt felt by liberals towards the wretched of the earth overlaps, though it is not identical with a primary rule of liberal strategy. This rule, which anyone may verify by a customary study of liberal behavior over a moderate period of time, may be stated as follows: the main enemy is to the right. Viewing liberalism from the outside, a more exact wording might be the preferred enemy is to the right. This rule is a matter of feeling, principle, conduct, and history. It is a basic parameter of liberalism understood as a personal attitude and as a political tendency. Referring to the development of progressive and radical political views in their own country from the 18th century on, the French put a similar point still more unconditionally. Il n'y a pas de ennemi au gauche. There is no enemy to the left. That formulation is perhaps too extreme for the main body of modern liberalism, though it is undoubtedly holds for liberalism's own left flank, as represented, for example, by most of the authors of the liberal papers. But all wings of liberalism unite in finding the main enemy, the preferred enemy, the enemy that one enjoys to come to grips with, is the right. Um, and then he goes on to say that, yeah, that even though if the liberals can identify a threat from the left, it doesn't feel like a threat. It doesn't feel like the same threat. So they will go out and try to crush fascism where they can find it, whether they have to invent it or if it's actually present in the world, but be okay with the communists and want to have discussions with communists. We want to, have negotiations and make excuses for it. And we see this in 2021 again with when Biden was asked about the concentration camps in China. He's like, well, it's cultural differences. I mean, who's to say, right? But I mean, as soon as Putin, gets a little too aggressive with Ukraine, suddenly America has to send in troops because this is of dire consequences, and we can't even contemplate how this could even happen. And look, and again, I'm not trying to say that Putin is less of a threat or a nicer person than Xi Jinping. I'm just simply saying that if you're going to view one as a threat, you should view both as a threat. If you're going to hate fascism, you can also hate communism. Like, these things, for a reasonable, rational human being, should be self-evident. And which all that means is it's pointing towards the fact that we're not dealing with a rational, reasonable people. Like, this is the ideology has expunged reason from its ranks. Let's say.
Yeah. On a point you mentioned earlier, I was looking for the quote, but I can't find it. Eric von Kudut-Leden, who was a fantastic, he was friends with Ludwig von Mises in Austria, and he was a Catholic monarchist outright. And so he's really smart, one of the best of the classical trained, people. And he wrote a book on leftism, and he brought the point that, like, we on the right view left as competing ideologies, when in reality it's how do you put it? It's not competing shoe stores to own the market. It's competing. It's different companies, different branches, and so it's one company, it's multiple branches, all competing to win, but they're all under the same banner. They're all the same Payless shoe stores. It's not Payless shoes and Target, and that's how we have a mistake of viewing it, because it really is one Sigma's offsuit instead of a bunch of different people. Which is what I thought about when he bends in that the left, how left is. That's how right people view it, and that's a mistake. We need to view it as one saying with competitors, not as people's opposition.
Well, not only that, but also that if you continue using the same tools that the left uses, we'll hear things like saying, like, well, all the right has to do is get in control of more media. And it's like, well, no, that's not going to do anything, because, again, okay, so fine. Let's say you have a 50-50 split in the media. It doesn't change it. It won't change the liberal mindset. It's not going to change liberalism. It's just going to create more. It's going to just, at best, it'll put the brakes on the cart, which is what I think classic conservatism was always designed to do, which is supposed to, like, stop the cart from going completely off the side of the hill. And the brakes are broken. The brakes are broken on the cart now. So no to everything else they're going to say. Ben Shapiro and all the rest of them. It's like, look, you can't, if your idea is to vote the right people in, you're still using democracy, and democracy is going to just produce these results eventually. So what you're gonna give yourself 10 years to do what with? To celebrate and go, yeah, we own the libs. Look, we had 4 years of Trump that was supposed to, like, be the big finger at the left, and all they did was give them more strength. So, and come back with more of a vengeance. So it's we need to get we need to get out of the framework completely to be able to restructure it.
This is the problem with a lot of the right, is they're so patriotic. They don't view the left as enemy. They view the left as, we're just fellow Americans. Just agree on some things. So these are the enemy, and if you don't destroy them, they're gonna come back with a vengeance. Like Curtis Yavin, I was listening to him talk. He's like, we need to if Trump ever went again, he needs to just destroy the State Department and fire everybody. Get rid of them. And like, yes, you don't need to. If the institution is rotted to the core, these are the enemies. They're not your fellow Americans. Get rid of them. And this is the right problem. They're too patriotic.
Yeah, I mean, Yarvin talked about this with his Civil War commentary, where he's like saying the South was always going to lose because they didn't have they thought the winning condition was to get the North out of beyond the Manson-Dixon line and just and create that barrier and go, okay, goodbye, so long, we're going to part ways. It's like, whereas the North was like, no, we're in this for total domination. So anything short of total domination is a loss for us.
They had a chance to march to the White House and take it, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. It's not our goal. And it's like, that should have been your goal. Yeah. I honestly think we'd be a lot better off if they did. If the Confederacy won and was the dominating party, I think states' rights would have been a stronger foundation, and we could have maybe moved towards more of a oligarchical. It would have been as great, but it would have been better than what we have now.
No, I disagree with you, man. Because again, they were operating with America's built as a classic liberal country. So, and this is my whole point, is that no matter who wins, no matter who's in control, if you're operating under a classic liberal framework in any way, shape, or form, you're going to get the same results. It's the program. These are functions, not glitches. These are features, not glitches. So it always ends in some sort of socialist, communist, yada yada yada, because it's the logical conclusion of all these ideas.
So I see it coming from. I think we would have got where we are now. I think it would have postponed it by a bit, and our current time would be better. But my point is that how to put this? The American idea was sold as one thing, and it was not one thing. So it was sold as a oligarchical federalist system, and in reality, it was not that at all. And the South was fighting for what the idea was sold on, not what the idea was. And so it was kind of they were both representing the same thing, but one representing the formal and one representing the informal. And I think if the informal one had, or the formal meeting had won, not the informal meeting, we would have prolonged and postponed the eventual collapse that we saw coming. Because what the sold meaning was not the actual meaning. So it was sold as not a liberal framework. It was sold differently than what it actually was. Which is my take on the Civil War. But I don't count the facts of history are so weird because there's so many defeated. You can't. This is why I'm actually not a fan of people who write alternative history. It's fantasy. You have no way of testing any of this. It's fun, but there's no actual metric for comparison.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also and the metrics for comparison we have. I mean, again, we just have to kind of look at, because we are dealing with ideology, so we can just say, well, what's inside the ideology? Now, you can say that maybe the South or at different parts of history had a slightly different view of the ideology, but they're still within it. So again, you have to think of things as being features, not bugs. Eventually all these things would just manifest themselves. Now they might manifest themselves slightly differently, as to your point, well, we don't know what would happen. Maybe the South had won, America would have gone communist in 1950. Who knows, right? It's impossible to tell. Yeah. But I just to answer your general point, in let's say the most meta general sense possible, I don't see how these things don't ever just become what they are. That these things are pretty much set. Once it's set in motion, it's only a matter of time. And some countries, like in the USSR, they skipped the whole classic liberal period, essentially, where they were starting to go through it. They said nope, zoop, and went right to the end, went to the end point, and collapsed faster. Whereas America stayed in that middle zone for longer and is now just in is now in the new final stages, and this is the collapse, right? And
Can't get here soon enough.
Still, be careful what you wish for, my friend.
Man, I am young, and I don't like the idea that my entire generation in life is going to be stuck in the absolute and just slowly going through the collapse. So like I'm 90 years old, and it's like, okay, it's done. Now we can build something. Like, no, I want to be part of the building. I'm stuck in the generation that has to deal with the collapse and not to build it. I want to. That's my only complaint about my age.
That's no, but hang on. To give you a bit of a white pill, though, we're in the period right now where these kind of conversations and any kind of work is vitally important, because this is the time when, if you can get certain ideas out there or principles out there, you can. Sorry, give me a sec.
It's all good, man.
I know, Bubba. So we can start to build things for the future generation, for her, for her generation, this crying little one. We can start building things that they can start benefiting from. Yeah. So that's our responsibility, and it's a good one. So what? We don't get to bask in the glory, and we plant trees that we'll never sit in the shade of. Fine, but at least we know that those trees have been planted. At least we have the hope, and genuine hope, not cope, that through our work and our suffering and our sacrifice,
Max, the future that real quick. Hope, not cope.
Yeah, hope, not cope.
Okay, please continue.
And it's genuine, and I think the way we do that, and this is what I bring up in my series Fathers and Kings, is it's all about rightful sacrifice. That sacrifice is the one thing that the left and the liberal framework does not understand. It just doesn't compute. They use the word, but it's always someone else. It's never them, right? You never think of your own sacrifice. You think of other people's, and that's where we get into this sort of, to break the frame. My only way of thinking of how to do it is to get into that Christian framework, to start talking about things like forgiveness, mercy, faith, grace. How do we enact that in this world, and reach out to secularists and say, look, we can do this, because as Burnham lays out, the infection of liberalism is so absolute that, and this is, going back to chapter 11, the failure of liberals to see the threat that they themselves present is the ultimate downfall of the system. Is that they can't stop themselves from doing these things because they're fully convinced that all these things are just and right, even as they see people brought under the heel of it, as we see people being destroyed and lives completely shattered because of their policies. They can't accept it because there's no mechanism for them to have forgiveness. There is no mechanism there. So, I'll take that as my life's work, is to start to generate acceptance of these principles and concepts, of somebody saying, no, look, man, we need to start forgiving people. We need to start acting in more merciful ways. We need to really start to preserve human decency. Because that's what's really gone to shit in the last 2 years, is human decency has been on full display as being in a massive crisis. And if we don't find ways of restoring that, then there is nothing to rebuild. That's, the whole project has gone to shit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good white pill. And your point about forgiveness being absent, that has been, when you said that, like I think the first podcast we did, that sent me down a spiral of thoughts about, like, that is what is missing. And it's been a lot of fun to think about that and like research that and read about that. That is, once you hear that and you notice it, oh, that is what is missing. There is no mechanism for forgiveness. There is no, like, humans are, like, this liberal framework is humans are perfect, not perfect. Humans are good, and they are geared towards the good. You make one mistake, you taint yourself with original sin as a mechanism for forgiveness. And so, like, it's very, we're living in the Garden of Eden, but men are capable of the Garden of Eden. But once they make one mistake, it's over. You taint yourself with original sin. There's no mechanism for baptism, and that is the problem. That's one of the problems with it.
Well, what started me on that whole, what started the whole mind worm with that working with me is when I was changing my daughter's drawers for the relatively first time, when she was first born. And it just struck me, and it's a very simple thought, maybe too simple, but to me that's why it's elegant, is that everyone that you hate, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Putin, whoever, was once a little baby who had shitty drawers on that had to be changed. And once you start looking at those people in that sense, and they were growing up, and then something went wrong, quote unquote, or um, made them who they are. And once you start to realize that their baseline, and this is where liberalism is correct, is that everyone is born in a relative pure state. All children are born, I would say, innocent, for lack of a better word, and other things begin to corrupt them. But the the difference of looking at it is acknowledging that the corruption is guaranteed. Religion just says, look, we're in a fallen world, we are fallen people. There's nothing you're going to do about it. All you can do is try to live up to these standards, and that will alleviate your suffering and will get you through the darker times. Whereas liberalism doesn't have those mechanisms.
Yeah.
It refuses to accept that as an axiom, and because of that, everything else, forgiveness and mercy, they're trying to find some reason for it, but it's not reasonable. Forgiveness is not reasonable, right? It's much more reasonable to hold a grudge. It's much more reasonable to hate your enemy and want to see everything horrible being done to them. That's quite reasonable in many cases. You can build a good case for it. That's why you have to get out of it and go, no, yes, I could hate you forever, but I'm choosing to forgive you. And in that forgiveness, I take back that power. And then we can get on with this project. And and I'm sure people are going to do the whole thing like, oh, what about pedophiles and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I may not be able to forgive certain people, I may not be able to forgive certain actions, but just because I can't doesn't mean it shouldn't be done in some level. It doesn't mean, and we shouldn't confuse forgiveness with condoning behavior. And mercy might be life imprisonment or death or expulsion or whatever have you. Like there's lots of different things we can talk about on those levels, but not to get mired down to it. But I think we need to have the left. We need to get leftists to understand that they are the bad guys, and right now, and that's okay. We can forgive them. And once you have that mechanism of forgiveness, then maybe hopefully we can start getting to a more rational center again.
But, what else did Chapter 11 say? Because I didn't get a chance to read it today. What else we talk about now?
He basically just goes through many different examples of how the left treats communists versus, let's say, how the left treats Nazis. I'll give you a quote. I'll read. Oh wait, here we go. We get to the something here. So to read from here. To a liberal, it seems eminently normal that all members of the political science or history or economics or philosophy department of a university should be, as in many important cases they are, liberals, plus a few somewhat left of liberal. But it seems shocking if a sizable percentage is of the right, rather a moderate right. Nearly all liberals believe communists should be allowed to speak on college campuses, and most liberals believe communists should be permitted to teach in colleges. And there have been many liberal campaigns of protests against the attempt of some college administrators to prevent communists from speaking or to fire them from faculties. There is no comparable liberal solicitude for fascists, or even for those belonging to what liberals like to refer to as the radical right. Even the strictest civil liberties liberals, who do defend in principle the right of fascists to speak in a public place, are seldom around when the issue comes up. In both Britain and the United States, liberals began in 1962 to develop the doctrine that words which are inherently offensive as far right, but not communist words seem to be, and do not come under the free speech mantle. So, again, we've said this before, I think in the last episode, that it's amazing that this book was written in the 1950s or was published in the 1950s, and you're already seeing all the groundwork being laid out as far back as like 1950s, 1960s, early 60s. Of what we've been living through the last 10 years or so. So we have to go further and further backwards to get to the origin place and to get to the point where these things started to develop. And again, because we're dealing with people who can't see their own errors, who believe that the system is perfect, it's just the people who are flawed. we need to find ways of of getting through to them, because this is absolute madness, and it's madness. It's generational madness. It's not just you're not just dealing with people in 2020 who are the current generation who are a bit off or being influenced by teachers from the 1980s. It's like no, we're dealing with people who have been growing up. Their grandparents were like this. Their great grandparents were like this. Like they've had this ideology implanted in their head firmly, and to shake them from it is going to take something, I think, much more powerful than just charts and graphs and impassioned speeches. It's going to have to be more example based. So we'll finish this off with the last little quote. Is this does not mean to imply that liberals never see an enemy to the left and never actively oppose persons or tendencies that are left of liberalism. They do, of course, and on some critical occasions, usually as a last resort, when all mediating alternatives have been exhausted. Some liberals will even treat the further left as, for the given hour, the main enemy. But this never gives a liberal an unmixed satisfaction, and he's especially uneasy when he finds that his bout with the left, he's becoming a self-invited enemy, ally from the right at his side. His conscience can never really be pure, and his heart never fully uplifted. His heart fully uplifted only when he's riding full tilt against a right-wing ogre, and we've seen that time and time again, right? Where I think Schuenhead or Jimmy Dore, or a few other people, begin to attack the left from the left, and then all of a sudden become this fan favorite of the right. They're like, well, I don't know, actually, hang on a second, right?
Yeah.
And start having to distance themselves in many ways. We see that with the Ethan Klein thing, right? Where Ethan Klein has decided to embed himself to the left because, again, there is no enemy from the left. So as long as if he goes far left, he can't possibly be the enemy. Right, he's the ally. He's a friend. Look,
he's the most radical. He's the one to follow.
Yeah, exactly. That's all good. We delete the Peterson videos, but then Hassan. Did you hear about this? That Hassan Piker, because I guess Jordan gave him Ethan Klein a tweet and said, "Hey, it's too bad, but can I have copies of those videos? Because I came on your show with the assumption that I would have access to the videos, or whatever." And Hassan Piker came back and was like, "No, but if you want to come on our show and debate us and talk about this, you can." It's like, oh, okay. So it's grift. We're in full grift mode. Oh, okay. That's nice to know. Yeah.
No, like that Hassan Piker. There's no, honestly, he's like Voss and Hassan Piker to me are the worst ones because they're
slime. They're slimy, man.
Yeah. I don't watch Dave Smith much anymore. Kind of watch a lot of podcasts. I do more audiobooks, but whenever I see him going after Hassan Pike, I'm like, I gotta watch this one. It's like a wrestling. It's like, I know this is gonna be this absolutely just get destroyed, but it's gonna be fun because it's like this guy's an idiot, and I want to see someone way smarter than him, point by point, refute him and then make fun of him at the same time. This is why Dave Smith is great, I think.
The only problem with that is that, and Hassan learned this from his uncle, Cenk Uygur, is that they don't care about losing the argument. That to them doesn't matter because they're going to reframe it anyways. It doesn't matter. When Cenk did that like 2 hours with Sam Harris, it was embarrassing.
So bad.
It was embarrassing, but Cenk got exactly what he wanted. Cenk got exactly what he wanted. Right? He got to sit down with Sam Harris, which automatically validated his position. Right? Which made him higher in the hierarchy. Right? Because why would Sam even deal with him if he wasn't somewhat important? Right? So he got that, and he got millions of views. He wins.
Yeah.
So, and it's exactly what Piker's doing. He picks fights, or says, and I think was it Vosh? Yeah, it's his name. Occasionally, I've never watched his show, but I'll see him do these tweets, and it's like, oh, you're picking a fight, and you're picking a fight with someone who, if they accept it, if they pick up the gloves, you win automatically. You win, because you get more views, and that's all they're in it for. That's it. Like Hassan Piker has no integrity.
No,
like nothing I can tell of.
Voss did a debate recently. I didn't watch it because I don't watch his content because I physically can't sit through it because it's that bad. But he debated a Catholic neuroscientist on the effects of porn. Where neuroscientists like, yeah, porn is bad, has disastrous effects on the brain chemistry, and Voss was going to say, no, porn is good, and you should watch it. And I'm like, obviously, we can prove for a fact that porn has negative effects on the brain. That's a scientific fact now. You could argue that that's somehow positive, but the fact is it affects the brain. Boss is gonna say no, it doesn't, and it's like okay, it's all for views. Like, it's all for views. It's like there's no way he's gonna win that debate. I want to watch it because to see him get destroyed, but at the same time, I can't look at him and not just feel disgusted.
Yeah,
Like
he's an ugly human being. But I mean, on top of that, it's just like, again, this isn't. He's taking the side that's the most easily defendable, because whether or not it causes harm or not is not their concern. It feeds desire, right? And anything that is, and this is the liberalism has been the greatest cure for responsibility. If you don't want to take responsibility, be a liberal. Because it's always someone else's fault. It's always something else. You can always blame it on some right winger. You can always blame it on something else. It's never your fault. It's never you, right? Or and if finally they have to concede that, okay, maybe this idea wasn't so great. Well, I didn't come up with it. It wasn't me. Like it was.
I just do what the card professor said to do.
I was just following the science. I was just following what the best laid out plans were. So again, with porn and all the rest of it, it's the easy out, right? It's the quick pill. You take a pill, you watch something that gives you a visceral dopamine rush, and then you move on with your day, because manifesting joy in one's life is incredibly difficult for most people. They have no reason for it. Like children are the best way to do that. The nature's given you, God gave you the easiest way to find joy in your life is have kids. I'll even go as far to say as I don't think everyone should have children. I think some people will be disastrous parents, and they need to sort themselves out way before they do that. I say that about myself. Like I had kids at exactly the right point, because if I had my daughter 10 years before, I was a mess. Like I wouldn't been able to be half a decent father.
Yeah.
I still struggle to do that, but I'm far less of a mess now. But yeah. But I mean, my daughter gives me joy every day. It's a tap. When you turn on, and frustration and all the rest of it. But it's readily there.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, and you can see that with the liberal framework as well, that they have to create these things. They have to engineer these things that, if you look at it from a natural order perspective, you already have it. It's a simple fix, really. I mean, simple, but you don't have to rebuild you don't have to rebuild nature, but they seem to be dead set to do that with with the vaccines. They're gonna create an artificial immune system.
Yeah.
Even though you have one, you already have one, but no, this one will be better.
This is better, yeah. It's. Well, man, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed your conversations. I'm looking forward to the next one. But let's wrap this up. What can people find you? What are your plugs?
You can find me on Twitter at 2Bit Podcast. We've got YouTube channels. We can look at us at Anchor FM. We're also on Spotify for all the audio versions. Sorry for everyone for my daughter being in the background making noise, but
it's all good.
It's these are the things of being a parent. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's lots of things in the works, but it's always a there's always a distant horizon line of work and trying to get things done in between diaper changes. So yeah, if we when you have a child, all of a sudden you realize how precious every single moment of when the child is asleep. So okay, man.
I'll see you.
Yeah.